Who were your role models?
Well, I mean, I grew up with the '67 team. You know, Jim Lomborg, certainly I was a pitcher when I was younger. You had to love a guy like him. Yaz was always Yaz, and you know, I think of some of the other names of, you know, you go through Petrocelli and you go through Tartable and Dalton Jones, and there was Darrell Brandon. So a lot of names come to mind. And so it's like at one time you felt like you knew them like they were, you know, not necessarily role models, but idols or whatever you want to call them. But they were people you looked up to because they were where you wanted to be.
Right. Up in September of 1980, and you're asked to pinch hit for one of the great icons of the Red Sox, Yastrzemski. Wow.
I think that was probably more Yaz's doing than anything else. Certainly nothing that I've ever done to deserve that. You know, he got injured that afternoon, and I think he probably said to Zim, "Why don't you give the kid a chance?" Yeah. And you know, I don't know that for a fact, but you know, I like the story, so I'm sticking to it. He just was that way with me. You know, a lot of people said he was harsh, and you know, he was very competitive. But when I was around him, he was very, very good to me. And that's something that I'll never forget. You know, Hall of Fame player, great player. You know, he doesn't have to give me 2 minutes of his time, but he always seemed to go out of his way to be nice to me, and I was always very thankful for that.
Big break comes the next year when they don't sign Fisk.
To come after him, in some ways, is very, very difficult, but in some ways, very, very easy, because you're not going to replace a Carlton Fisk, so you can only be you. And I would constantly be reminded that, listen, he was special. I'm just me. Well, just trying to find my way, you know.
Sporting News Rookie of the Year that year. You caught Roger Clemens' game when he struck out 20. You had 20 putouts. Did you know he was on that night? Did you get a sense of it, or was it just all of a sudden cumulative? My God, he's just starting to build up strikeouts.
I don't know, must have been Roger's 4th or 5th start, would be my guess. And he was coming off a shoulder surgery, and every start he seemed like he was getting a little stronger, feeling a little more confident in his ability. That evening, he was, I don't want to say he was on, he was very, very aggressive, and so he was feeling pretty good. But the hitters were telling me that they were not feeling very good. They were swinging and missing. They were taking strikes. They looked like they were looking for something else, and they just looked uncomfortable. And you know, when they finally started to catch up on him, he started to use the breaking ball, and he was executing it very well. He was moving pitches in and out, up and down, and his velocity was high. His breaking ball was sharp. His control was excellent. And you know, when you run into a guy like that, it becomes very frustrating for the hitters, and they start guessing, and if they're not guessing right, and so it was a dominant performance, and I don't think anybody expected that. But after that evening, I think every time that Roger was pitching, people thought something special could happen.
Next game, you get 16 putouts also, which puts you in a unique category of, as I understand it, more putouts in 2 consecutive games than anybody.
Well, I have more putouts than anybody, but I don't feel like I did anything except my job. Yeah. Those guys are special, and I just happen to be on the other end of it. The 2 of them are the ones that should be noticed.
Who was it, by the way? Who was
Bruce Hurst.
Okay, Bruce Hurst. All-Star 2 years running, 85 and 86. Is that special for you?
If I was to say it's not special, I'd be lying. I feel very fortunate I had a chance to be around those people. It might have been the only time in baseball that I can remember that I felt uncomfortable in a locker room.
Really?
Just because I looked and I was like, wow, wow, wow. And I never looked at myself as wow.
86 was really a peak year for you for lots of reasons. And I think also, of course, the Mets game, and you get into that. People keep bringing that up, the 6th game, and of course then you lead the 7th game. I mean, it's just, people sort of forget the fact of that process. Is that a conversation that they have with you and other people on the team?
conversation is a lot easier to take now.
Right.
I don't feel any less bad about not winning.
Right.
But it's easier to handle. The World Series meant so much more to me, I think, than most. I mean, some people play it because that's what we're playing for.
Right, right.
When you grew up 40 miles from Boston and you've been there for 5 or 6 years, there's a little different meaning to you than there is to the guy who is from California or Texas or Florida. And it doesn't mean that it's not important to them. It just means they might know the history, but they didn't live the history.
Right.
So I was always well aware of what was going on and how special it would have been to win. And to have it so close and then not win. So I really took that a little harder than most people. But also being a realistic person, I think everybody did everything they could.
Right.
We gave our all. It's hard to, it's easy for somebody to sit there and watch and say you should have won and say, yeah, we should have won, but we didn't. And it's easier to talk about the older you get. But, there's still a time that you said it was that close. And you go, if not but a twist of fate,
Yeah.
that you're not. And then I look back and I said, let's be realistic here, fellas. That series easily could have been a Houston, California series.
Sure.
So there were some special things that happened throughout the playoffs.
And you were a part of a lot of that turned it in a very...
Yeah, well, but you still, you tried to handle your pain by going, well, we were very lucky to be there, and we should have won, but we didn't. And it's hard. It's like I'm saying I have to live with this too, and not till I talked in radio shows and TV shows, and people would, come and ask questions, and all of a sudden you give an answer they don't like, and then somebody goes off on it, and you're going, wait, you're asking me how I felt. I'm not saying it's how you were supposed to feel,
Right.
but that's what happens when you give opinion. It's like if people think it should be more than what it is, but. Like I said, I deal with it daily. And, the thing that always comes up for me is, was it a wild pitch or pass ball? And what do you think about Bill Buckner? And it's like, we had 25 guys. 25 guys contributed in every kind of way, and everybody could have done something more. Those are two instances where you sit there and go, it could have been different. Well, we can show you probably 40 or 50 or 100 different things that say, listen, if this was different, that could have changed too.
Right, right.
It's like what happens is things get magnified, the greater the importance. I look at it, people think we lost the series in Game 6. We did not. We lost the game in Game 7 and still had a chance to win. We just didn't do it.
You had a home run. It's Game 7.
Yeah, it could have been a Disney movie, if we would have won it.
Did you meet Ted Williams?
Yes.
What was he like?
What was he like? He was a man that demanded attention. Very strong-voiced, certainly no indecision in his voice, and you just hoped that you could impress enough that he would think something of you. You'd stay close enough to him so you could hear everything he had to say, just so you might not miss something that was very, very important to you. We were not friendly. I was not anything special. I was just a kid looking at what is probably the greatest hitter of all time, especially if you grew up in Boston, you think he's the man.
Right.
And so I was very fortunate. I actually caught a glimpse of him one day in a movie theater. I was like, you don't get awestruck too often, but he was a man that not only was he great, but he had a personality as great. Not too many people affected me that way. He was one of them. First time stepping in Fenway Park, with the Red Sox uniform on, going, wow, am I okay? Is this really me? This was actually a nice little break, and I'm glad I got a chance to talk with you, and you certainly were well prepared. You had more stuff on me than I knew. I go, oh, really? Thanks. I appreciate it. So.